This is Victor, Montana. We were last here in late April. It's taken me a while to come back this far. And I bicycled all this way and I didn't take any footage because we've seen that trip before and I was kind of focused on moving my legs. So that's Victor. This is about 50 miles north of my house. And today I'm going north along the the Highway 93 bike trail, a couple more miles north. And also another reason I didn't take a lot of footage is even though the Bitterroot Valley is beautiful, place along Highway 93, it's basically a place along the highway, not a lot to see here, so I might make one or two stops before my final destination, but a couple miles will be there. So a couple miles north, still along Highway 93, and I went by this building and I wondered what it was because that's, has a lot of bays for full-size trucks. I wonder if that was firefighting related. That's actually the base for the electric co-op, and that's why there's all those truck bays. Beautiful view of the Bitterroot, and actually this is Bell Crossing, and I think I'm actually going to cross the road here. I think I might spin that off into a separate video. So I took a little detour to Bell Crossing. It was pretty scary. Crossing the highway here is pretty scary. The road here right now, after development and more people moving in, too much traffic to be controlled by, flashing lights. And I've actually read that there's a talk about how they're going to modify this intersection, especially as you get further north in the valley. There's more people coming from the south to go to work in Missoula, and that's just increasing. And, I talked about that in the Tucker Crossing video. On a more positive note, one thing I want to say about today, it's September 20, which is either the equinox or very close to the equinox. I came back to Montana on March 20, so 6 months that I've been here. And today, after a hot, smoky summer, one of the reasons I'm out today is that it's really perfect day. It's about exactly 70 Fahrenheit, but light clouds, no precipitation, light wind, so it's a really good day to ride, and one of the last chances I might have to do this ride. We are almost to our destination, but I want to make a note of this. This is McCullough Creek, and here you can't really see, but McCullough Creek is running from the direction of the river up to the direction of the mountains. Is it running uphill? No. There's just basically a slight land border here where there's a rise there, or this is diverted out of the Bitterroot River as a channel, something like that. And it goes around here and then it will rejoin the river ahead, but we have like a little bump in the topography. And it's interesting that around here, obviously most of the creeks flow directly from those cliffs in the mountains, the canyons in the mountains, into the river, but sometimes it's more complicated than that. Just wanted to make a note of that. And there's the revelation, McCullough Creek. And actually, now that I think about it, I'm wondering, is it flowing against the expected direction here or earlier? And it's so still right now because of the low flow, I can't tell. And in other news, welcome to Stevensville. This is our destination. Stevensville is about 15-20 miles north of Hamilton, at least 20 miles north of my house, and is one of the bigger cities in the Bitterroot Valley. It's probably the biggest next to Hamilton. So we're gonna go forward a little bit, then we're gonna turn and go into Stevensville proper. Also, just a couple hundred feet after McCullough Creek, we have this pedestrian bridge, and I love pedestrian bridges. They're really solidly built too. Over, I think this is Kootenai Creek, which is flowing more like I expect a creek to flow out of the Bitterroot, and is very clear. Okay, still need to get to town proper. So I forgot about this key feature, which is we actually have a bicycle underpass that allows me to go into town without having to cross the highway. The other thing I wanted to mention is, earlier I mentioned there's a lot of fires and smoke. You can see a lot of fires and smoke. And one of the largest and most dangerous fires, you're looking at it right there. So after the rain, that fire is just left smoldering, and from here you can't see anything. But if you were to go up in there, you would still see like glowing embers and stuff like that in that valley. And actually maybe you can still see some smoke. So fires can lay dormant for a while and then come back. Although this late in the season, it's not causing too much problems. So I'm gonna swing under here and see see if this is where I want to go. So most of the towns in Ravalli County in the Bitterroot Valley are along Highway 93, like Hamilton, Victor, Darby. We all saw it directly on there. But Corvallis and Stevensville are actually a little bit off on the east side highway. But what has happened here, as happens in a lot of towns like Woodburn in Oregon, is that parts of the city have crept up to meet the highway because, you know, that's where you stop for gas and subway. And also you have the Super One here. Stevensville is one of two cities in the Bitterroot Valley that really has a full-size supermarket, so people come from all over the northern half of the valley, I think, to shop here if they're not going to go to Missoula. And having seen the highway, I want to go and see historic Stevensville. So we are crossing the Bitterroot River here. The Bitterroot River is a little bit west of town in Stevensville. And we also have here a bike path, so it's a lot nicer to cross than a near Woodside crossing. This is a really nice wide lane on this bridge. So along this bike path, there's trees planted, and by each tree there's a memorial plaque, so people can remember their friends and family with a tree, which is a great way to do it. So we're about to enter Old Stevensville. And if we followed this road south, we'd go back to Corvallis. This is actually the East Side Highway. And if we followed it that way, we would go to the Lee Metcalf Wildlife Refuge, which is wonderful, but where we won't be going today. We're going to see what's in town. So we have a brewery here. We're going to have a lot of microbreweries and other tourist businesses, like a lot of the Bitterroot Valley and Montana. There's a lot of tourism here. And we also have an old brick downtown full of brick buildings selling interesting things. We also have a library right on Main Street. I've been in that library before. It's a nice place. And they are building another library because I think this structure is just kind of old and limited. And just walking along Main Street in Stevensville. We have what looks like a Van Gogh mural, but I don't think that's an actual original Van Gogh. I'm gonna guess that. And this is a nice downtown, nice place, a lot of local businesses, very walkable. You can dine on the sidewalk. And one thing to say is that, like a lot of tourist towns, you go a little bit outside of this and it's going to look a lot more like, you know, typical American suburb. You saw the highway. Also, you know, outside of working in the service industry, a lot of people here are obviously commuting as a commuter suburb, blah, 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 blah. Nothing is perfect, but look at, you have a playhouse on Main Street. We don't have to complain. So I've actually reached the end of downtown. One thing about today is I did bicycle here from Hamilton, and it is getting later in the year, so I don't have as much time to walk around. It's almost 4 p.m., so I kind of have to make a quick trip. So there are a couple more things I want to see in downtown. The boutique, it's like, or should I say the boutique, like it's the only one. So like a lot of places around here, it's been a couple years since I've been here. And it looks even more hoppy than I remember it, but maybe that was just the time of year I came. It looks like the businesses are even more busy, also maybe more tourists oriented. 213 Main Street. From what I could look at, this was the site of a bookstore owned by Senator George McGovern. If it's not that one, if that's incorrect information, it was somewhere along here. And I actually came here in the past, and I could actually still see the faded sign. So the irony there is a lot of times, you know, the political stereotypes now about the United States, which are kind of true, but about the political orientation of Montana and of a small rural town like Stevensville, the most liberal presidential candidate that ever was, you know, in the United States, as well as probably the most honest presidential candidate we ever had, who lost the 1972 election against Richard Nixon. He retired and lived in Stevensville, and he was kind of a fixture of the community. And he had a store along here, and people would come and talk to him. He was a senator from South Dakota, but he retired here, from what I understand. So just interesting, all these little details that might go against prevailing narratives, which we will see another one in a minute. Just to expand on that as I walk away from Main Street, also in 1972, obviously, Richard Nixon from Los Angeles, George McGovern from South Dakota. So there was a time when, yeah, like California was solidly Republican, and the Farm Belt, Great Plains, had a lot of liberal political ideas. So there's a pendulum to how that stuff changes, and I think a lot of times people now are stuck in the situation, and the battle lines being drawn have always been that way. In reality, it's a much more complicated story. So now I'm on my bicycle going through some of the older residential neighborhoods. Outside the city, there's more typical, like, modern residential neighborhoods. But this is what old Stevensville looks like, although not as old as we're going to see. This is typical, or at least not atypical, of a lot of small towns. On one hand, you have these stately old houses. On the other, you have, you know, mobile homes, manufactured homes. Not saying there's anything wrong with that, but in a lot of suburbs, these places would be separated by miles. But it's pretty common, like little towns, to see those things really close together, both in terms of age and style and the price of the home. And I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I might actually have to look at a map in a second. Well, there we go. This is an old mission here. There will be a sign about this. So Stevensville is the oldest European settlement in Montana, and this historic building was the mission built by Jesuit missionaries in the 1800s. Within sight of the mountains. Beautiful site. And there's actually an interesting story here, because when we think of conversion, and we might associate with colonialism and power and unpleasant things, and there's reasons for that. But in the case of the people here, they actually sent missions to get missionaries to come here. They had heard about you know, European civilization and stuff, and seen, you know, trappers and stuff, and they actually sent delegates from Montana all the way to St. Louis in Missouri, to ask for missionaries to come here and to teach. And so Jesuit missionaries came here, and it's a complicated history, because the people were forcibly removed up to the Mission Valley. But it wasn't always a negative experience, even if it turned out that way. Very complicated history. I hope I'm not oversimplifying this. But it is a beautiful building and a beautiful site, and there is a place you can visit here. And if I had more time and I was here on the right day, I certainly would. And one of the ways that that relates to the previous point is, just like very liberal Democrats living in small rural communities isn't part of our contemporary political narrative, indigenous cultures actively seeking European civilization isn't also. And there's reasons why that those things aren't discussed, because those are exceptions. But, you know, when you go out and see new things, go to even a small town, experience its history, sometimes cracks appear in the narrative and life becomes more complicated. That's my philosophical statement, and I should probably start heading back now. Now there's Stevensville. I would have liked to show more of the residential neighborhoods and things on the outskirts of town to give a good cross-section. But, you know, the short story is nice little town, good tourist things, nice dining, walkability, lots of history. But like a lot of these little towns, you know, there is always another side to that. It's not perfect. It's not as cute as it looks at first. But yeah, life isn't perfect. Anyway, I'm going back home, and I'll probably make a couple updates on my way back, but I do want to kind of motivate at this point. So bicycling back to 93, and as you can see, we have a great view of the mountain. So bicycling back down south, which also makes it an uphill ride, although not terribly so. And this bike path continues for a long while. Smooth, well maintained, except for a few points. safe. Not the most attractive route, obviously. It's just right by the highway. You can see scenery to the sides. And if you wanted to, there are actually like parallel roads in the, off of this highway and off of this bike path that are nicer, but take more effort. I stopped to walk because my legs were getting tired. It is a little bit harder on the way back than it was on the way there. That's sometimes the case. And also when bicycling, I sometimes think not just how far can I go, and not even how far can I go and return, but what if I have a problem? How hard would it be to walk back? But today I'm doing fine, and this bike trail is pretty safe. I recommend it to cyclists. We are by the Bitterroot River, right next to Blodgett Park. Bridge into Hamilton is right up there. And it's often the case between Stevensville and Victor, I was like, uh-oh, I went too far. And then on the way back, I don't know whether it's the pass is smoother and flatter, or maybe because I was in familiar territory, it did go quite quickly. But still, my legs are going to be jelly when I get home. And Stevensville was nice. I hope I got to show a good cross-section of it. And that was one of the last places on my list to go to before winter comes, or before autumn comes. So I hope you like it, and there will be more videos, but this might be the last really long bike ride I can take for a while.